Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is The Direwolves of Winterfell, episode 6-14, A White Shadow and a Subverted Commander, covering Jon and Ghost's bond in the beginning of A Dance with Dragons. In this volume, we'll continue to monitor Ghost's unique themes of silence and possible telepathic communications through feast/dance, while watching for more instances of outside interventions in his actions. As always, we'll also investigate the themes from our prior volumes, including personality and mood mirroring, obedience versus independence, shadowing/protecting/fear of the wolves, the related wolves' innate ability to sense threats, belonging to the pack, the instinct to hunt, being affectionate when they're together, and bad things happening when they're separated. Jon's being Lord Commander changes some of the dynamics in this volume, especially the theme of obedience. The theme of Jon's being alone, seen earlier when Jon was with the wildling raiding party, returns in this volume as Jon isolates himself from the rest of his brothers. Ghost is ever at his side, but unfortunately in the end Jon isolated himself from Ghost again as well. As with Greywind and Robb's death, Ghost recognizes the danger from Jon's betrayers long before the act, but Jon was blind to these signals. Wolf dreams also feature prominently in this volume, indicating a much stronger bond. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 1. This volume begins with such a dream. We've covered it in the last 3 Direwolf essays, in fact, as Ghost thinks of each of his remaining packmates during the dream. This dream is much more descriptive than any of Summer's had been. I think this is an indication that Ghost has stronger telepathy. Summer, in our most descriptive dream in his consciousness, could only sense the other wolves, but he cannot smell them or hear them. By contrast, Ghost's visions of Shaggy and Nymeria here have sight and hearing and even taste, which would lead us to assume he shares their senses of smell and touch as well. Shaggy is injured in the scene, by a unicorn actually, in the rain, and is now feasting on his corpse. This is a vivid image, even including weather. With Nymeria, there is a clear image of her howling at the moon with her huge pack of 100 wolves. We also get information about how often Nymeria hunts, so either he is getting Nymeria's thoughts, or he has these visions of her pack all the time. In the paragraph after that, Ghost tastes blood, presumably Shaggy's kill, or licking of his own wound, and hears Nymeria's pack's howls. He thinks of Summer twice, confirming that he can't sense him, specifically because he was beyond the wall. He also recalls that he smelled of Summer, which confirms that he can smell through the bond, leaving only touch remaining unconfirmed as transferable through the pack bond for Ghost. The white wolf raced through a black wood, beneath a pale cliff as tall as the sky. The moon ran with him, slipping through a tangle of bare branches overhead across the starry sky. "Snow," the moon murmured. The wolf made no answer. Snow crunched beneath his paws. The wind sighed through the trees. Far off he could hear his packmates calling to him, like to like. They were hunting too. A wild rain lashed down upon his black brother as he tore at the flesh of an enormous goat, washing the blood from his side where the goat's long horn had raked him. In another place, his little sister lifted her head to sing to the moon, and 100 small gray cousins broke off their hunt to sing with her. The hills were warmer where they were, and full of food. Many a night his sister's pack gorged on the flesh of sheep and cows and horses, the prey of men, and sometimes even on the flesh of man himself. "Snow!" the moon called down again, cackling. The white wolf padded along the man trail beneath the icy cliff. The taste of blood was on his tongue, and his ears rang to the song of the 100 cousins. Once they had been 6, 5 whimpering blind in the snow beside their dead mother, sucking cool milk from her hard dead nipples, whilst he crawled off alone. 4 remained, and 1 the white wolf could no longer sense. "Snow," the moon insisted. The white wolf ran from it, racing toward the cave of night where the sun had hidden, his breath frosting in the air. On starless nights, the great cliff was as black as stone, a darkness towering high above the wide world. But when the moon came out, it shimmered pale and icy as a frozen stream. The wolf's pelt was thick and shaggy, but when the wind blew along the ice, no fur could keep the chill out. On the other side, the wind was colder still, the wolf sensed. That was where his brother was, the gray brother who smelled of summer. Snow! An icicle tumbled from a branch. The white wolf turned and bared his teeth. Snow! His fur bristling as the woods dissolved around him. Snow! 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 He heard the beat of wings. Through the gloom, a raven flew. It landed on Jon Snow's chest with a thump and a scrabbling of claws. Snow! It screamed into his face. When studying Bran and Summer, we had asked if Ghost has more ability to sense his siblings, or if this dream is more vivid than Summer's, simply because the author was choosing to reveal a bit more in each volume. At the time, we reserved judgment, but upon reflection of everything we've learned thus far in Part 6, I lean heavily toward Ghost being much stronger than Summer in telepathic ability. Jon's dream inside Ghost is interrupted by the Lord Commanders, his Raven, and by Dolorous Ed. Ghost's reaction, with bristling fur and a snarl, is probably a reflection of Jon not wanting the dream interrupted. While Ghost is clearly more powerful in the bond, at this point Jon still has the types of issues Bran had late in A Clash of Kings and early in A Storm of Swords, with not being in control while in the wolf, or not wanting to return to his own form. There is one place where Jon is a bit more advanced than Bran, in that he seems to remember more of the wolf dreams than Bran had at that point in the development of his power. That is on display in the passage that follows, where Jon recalls several details of the past dream, though he sadly still believes all his brothers dead, even though Robb is the only one truly dead. Following that, we get confirmation that Ghost was indeed not sleeping in his normal place, confirmation of what we already knew, that he was out running. The fact that he is not near shows that Ghost believes there is no current threat to Jon, or else Ghost would be at his post as protector. Jon pissed in the darkness, filling his chamber pot as the old bear's raven muttered complaints. The wolf dreams had been growing stronger, and he found himself remembering them even when awake. Ghost knows that Grey Wind is dead. Robb had died at the Twins, betrayed by men he'd believed his friends, and his wolf had perished with him. Bran and Rickon had been murdered too, beheaded at the behest of Theon Greyjoy, who had once been their Lord Father's ward, but if dreams did not lie, their direwolves had escaped. At Queen's Crown, one had come out of the darkness to save Jon's life. Summer, it had to be. His fur was gray, and Shaggy Dog is black. He wondered if some part of his dead brothers lived on inside their wolves. Later, Jon's cloak hung on a peg by the door, his sword belt on another. He donned them both and made his way to the armory. The rug where Ghost slept was empty, he saw. Unfortunately, in our next scene, we learn that threats to Jon are already forming, so it would be better if Ghost were with him more often for protection. Melisandre warns Jon to keep him close in our first straightforward foreshadowing of Jon's death. Jon doesn't seem to take her seriously until she says, "You know nothing, Jon Snow." We don't know his reaction to this because the chapter ends. One might think he'd take it seriously, but his actions in the next few chapters don't reflect this. Regardless, Mel clearly recognizes the utility of Ghost as a protector. Jon should, too. Don't be so certain. The ruby at Melisandre's throat gleamed red. It is not the foes who curse you to your face that you must fear, but those who smile when you are looking and sharpen their knives when you turn your back. You would do well to keep your wolf close beside you. Ice, I see, and daggers in the dark. Blood frozen red and hard, and naked steel. It was very cold. A Dance with Dragons, Bran 1. As a contrast to Ghost's thoughts last chapter, in the passage below, we see that Bran needs to remind Summer of the existence of his real pack. Summer, beyond the wall and unable to sense the rest of his pack, doesn't even seem to remember his siblings. Ghost clearly has a much better memory than Summer as well, so Bran's boast about Summer's intelligence, back from A Game of Thrones, seems dubious at this point as well. Bran may have thought that due to mirroring of his own thoughts onto Summer. When he was done with that one, he moved on to the next, and devoured the choicest bits of that man too. Ravens watched him from the trees, squatting dark-eyed and silent on the branches as snow drifted down around them. The other wolves made do with his leavings. The old male fed first, then the female, then the tail. They were his now. They were pack. "No," the boy whispered. "We have another pack. Levi's dead, and maybe Grey Wind too. But somewhere there's still Shaggy Dog and Nymeria and Ghost. Remember Ghost?" A Dance with Dragons, Jon 2, and A Feast for Crows, Samwell 1. The next chapter with Ghost is an amalgam of 2 chapters covering many of the same events, one from Sam's POV in A Feast for Crows, and the other from Jon's in A Dance with Dragons. The first 2 mentions show Ghost eating, as Jon returns from business about the castle. Then as Sam joins Jon not long after. Sam also reminds us of Ghost's silence. From A Dance with Dragons, Jon 2. When he went to close the door, Jon saw that Ghost was stretched out beneath the anvil, gnawing on the bone of an ox. The big white direwolf looked up at his approach. "Past time you were back." He returned to his chair to read over Maester Aemon's letter once again. And from A Feast for Crows, Samwell 1. "Lord Snow is waiting." 2 guards in black cloaks and iron half-helms stood by the doors of the armory, leaning on their spears. Harry Hal was the one who'd spoken. Mully helped Sam back to his feet. He blurted out thanks and hurried past them, clutching desperately at the stack of books as he made his way past the forge with its anvil and bellows. A shirt of ringmail rested on his workbench, half completed. Ghost was stretched out beneath the anvil, gnawing on the bone of an ox to get at the marrow. The big white direwolf looked up when Sam went by, but made no sound. Later, Ghost resumes his role as protector at Jon's side. Jon doesn't have a wolf dream that night because Ghost sleeps there with him. Instead, he has a nightmare about how he forced Gilly to abandon her child to save Mance's. Jon donned his cloak and strode outside. He made the rounds of Castle Black each day, visiting the men on watch and hearing their reports firsthand, watching Ulmer and his charges at the archery butts, talking with the king's men and queen's men alike, walking the ice atop the wall to have a look at the forest. Ghost padded after him, a white shadow at his side. Later that chapter. Ghost slept at the foot of the bed that night, and for once Jon did not dream he was a wolf. Even so, he slept fitfully, tossing for hours before sliding down into a nightmare. Later, he muses to Sam about the first time he saw Gilly, being cornered by Ghost. He implies that she should have been worried about Jon. Sam, on the other hand, thinks he meant she should have worried about Craster. It highlights Jon's empathy, even as he tries to harden himself in his decision. This might be another example of Jon's overly humble self-image. He feels he has done the only thing he could, but also feels it makes him a bad person. Jon's feeling of inadequacy here reminds us of him underestimating his own performance in sword fights with Corran and with Iron Emmett. Jon was remembering. "The first time I saw Gilly," he said, "she was pressed back against the wall of Craster's Keep, this skinny, dark-haired girl with her big belly, cringing away from Ghost. He had gotten in among her rabbits, and I think she was frightened that he would tear her open and devour the babe. But it was not the wolf she should have been afraid of, was it?" That was from Jon's point of view. Now from Sam's. No, Sam thought. Craster was the danger, her own father. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 3. Ghost appears in Jon's following chapter in a shadowing role again. Does this mean that there is reason to believe he might be unsafe at this point? That there is some resistance to his leadership already? If we believe Melisandre, yes. The first scene talks about Ghost's eyes again, calling them pools of fire. Jon also reflects Ghost's taste of blood in his mouth. Note that he seems to want to reject this part of their bond. We'll look for this to be a continuing theme. He was walking beneath the shell of the Lord Commander's tower, past the spot where Ygritte had died in his arms, when Ghost appeared beside him, his warm breath steaming in the cold. In the moonlight, his red eyes glowed like pools of fire. The taste of hot blood filled Jon's mouth, and he knew that Ghost had killed that night. No, he thought. I am a man, not a wolf. He rubbed his mouth with the back of a gloved hand and spat. Clytus blinked. A sword that makes its own heat. Would be a fine thing on the wall. Jon put aside his cup and drew on his black moleskin gloves. A pity that the sword that Stannis wields is cold. I'll be curious to see how his Lightbringer behaves in battle. Thank you for the wine. Ghost, with me. Jon Snow raised the hood of his cloak and pulled at the door. The White Wolf followed him back into the night. While Jon seems to have been resisting part of his bond with Ghost in that passage, in the final paragraph of the passage that follows, he remembers that Ghost is part of him, more than a friend. Given that Ghost is in the room, the affection of the scene is touching. Note also that Clytus seems to give Jon very strong wine, or even drugged wine, in the prior quote, because in the scene that follow, Jon continues to work while Ghost sleeps, but unfortunately is unable to be effective, writing out a few simple letters. Further, he makes one of the biggest blunders of his command at this time, sending away 4 of his closest friends and biggest supporters. Clearly, Jon doesn't understand politics at all. He should have sent away the men he didn't want. Just kidding, but still, he truly needed these friends as his surrogates in the days and months to come. The idea, first suggested to me by Preston Jacobs, that Clytus poisoned or drugged Jon here, causing this blunder, is intriguing. When he peeled off his gloves, his hands were stiff and cold. It took him a long while to get the candles lit. Ghost curled up on his rug and went to sleep. But Jon could not rest yet. The scarred pine wood table was covered with maps of the wall and the lands beyond, a roster of rangers, and a letter sent from the Shadow Tower, written in Sir Dennis Mallister's flowing hand. He read the letter from the Shadow Tower again, sharpened a quill, and unstoppered a pot of thick black ink. He wrote 2 letters, the first to Sir Dennis, the second to Cotter Pike. Both of them had been hounding him for more men. Halder and Toad he dispatched to the Shadow Tower, Gren and Pip to Eastwatch by the sea. The ink would not flow properly, and all his words seemed curt and crude and clumsy, yet he persisted. When he finally put the quill down, the room was dim and chilly, and he could feel its walls closing in. Perched above the window, the old bear's raven peered down at him with shrewd black eyes. My last friend, Jon thought ruefully, and I had best outlive you, or you'll eat my face as well. Ghost did not count. Ghost was closer than a friend. Ghost was part of him. This is a good place to stop. See you next time. Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. The morning rise. Songs of love, her bell I'd ring in the window, but lies should see. Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. The shade of the walls so high. It's so lonely. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.